What's up guys, Evan Jarvis here. In today's video, you are going to learn who to target with light 3-bets, what hands are the best candidates to use when 3-betting light, why calling 3-bets out of position is the biggest sucker bet in poker, and thus why bumping your 3-bet percentage from 6% to 12% to maybe even 18% is going to make you a lot more money in the long run. This is part 2 of a 3-part series, so if you haven't yet watched part 1, I invite you to do so. I've put a link in the video description so you can click that and check that video out, and that way you can get the most out of this lesson. When you're up to speed and you're ready for the action, then keep on watching and let's get stacking.
All right, guys, I won't take up too much more of your time. That first item was the biggest building block, but let's continue our pre-flop domination with a mind to get one person to put a ton of money in the middle with a bunch of weak hands so we can steal that money later. So here you have 8-5 of diamonds, 50 big blinds. Everybody around you has 50 big blinds or more, and under the gun +2 as open, you are here on the cutoff. What is your move? If you were just teleported into a North American table, a $50 tournament, what would you do here? What is the average player's opening percentage from this position in your games? It's funny, a lot of guys in the United States will know the average batting average of an MLB player, or in Europe, people will know how many goals their favorite striker made last year, but they don't know the average opening percentage of the average guy in their games. That's really funny. Another good question for more advanced guys. Well, we'll get into that in just a second. Why do you fold, call, raise there? Write something down. If you have nothing to write, ask how many times a session you're in this spot. So if we were just developing your jab with the open, this is the counter punch. This is the cross. If you don't have these two, it's going to be very hard to win. And I would contend, if I teach you anything new today, I would contend we didn't really understand the open and the 3-bet to begin this session. If you do 3-bet, how often do you 3-bet? Okay, time is up. Okay, get a good look at this situation again. Ask yourself how often you're in this situation. Now let's discuss it. Quite frankly, this question has no answer with the initial details I gave you if you were just teleported to a situation. But if I were teleported into a North American game, I would 3-bet. If I were in a Euro Poker Stars tournament, with a bunch of regulars, then I would fold. Why do you think the answers change? If you do 3-bet, how often do you 3-bet? There is a GTO response to this, but if you're dealing with guys at Planet Hollywood or in a $20 party poker tournament, you should really base your answer on what guys you can exploit in population tendencies. Why do you raise there? You should always be raising here when you're in position if you can, and you should do it when the guy is opening 20% of the hands or more. The worst regular in the world could not lose money if they played all their pots in position versus a guy who has 20% of the hands. I know this because when I was really young, or when I was a teenager, I had this in like 4 other plays. That was pretty much it. I read Let There Be Range when it first came out. One of my buddies told me about it. And they discussed how you could 3-bet 15% ranges and the guy wouldn't have top pair a significant percentage at the time. And this was the only play I had. But if you're going to play a big pot with me out of position with a capped range that has a bunch of junk, I would have to be the worst regular in the world to lose money. Now, why do we want to focus on 20% of the hands, not 15%? Let's discuss that. It's a little more safe, 20%. This is the problem if a guy is opening 20% of the hands. First of all, guys, look at this range. Ask yourself how many guys are really folding any of these hands from the low jack, hijack, or cutoff. Most guys are opening even wider than this, most notably the suited connectors, but many times suited gappers, many times dry aces. In live tournaments where everyone's bored out of their mind, people open all these hands from practically any spot. This is going to get a little esoteric, guys, but ever since the cell phone has become more of a thing, a smartphone, because when I started playing poker, we were still using flip phones, MySpace was a thing, and George Bush was in office. And people had better patience. I can say that. People would open eights plus, ace jack plus, but now we're also conditioned to never be bored. You see people just getting bored at the poker table and just opening too many hands. You see a lot of, like, it's not inconceivable to see 9-6 suited open. I had never seen 9-6 suited open. I tried to steal the blinds with 10-6 suited, my first ever live tournament. Oh my God, was that in 2003? But it was, I opened from like the cutoff and everybody got to see it because the big blind called me and the board came 10-6-3 and the person had king 10. And I didn't hear about it, didn't hear the end of it for weeks. But now opening ranges have, over the last 10 years, have expanded incredibly. And look what a problem this is. The problem with that is that everybody is afraid to get their money in at the beginning of tournaments. So they just flat out of position, especially 50 big blinds deep or more. It used to be really common to see people just get it in with queens, ace, king. You don't see that as much anymore. Now it's more, they're going to flat ace, king out of position, queens out of position. So we're being nice to this guy in the analysis we're about to do because we have the guy with a bunch of strong hands post-flop, including pocket queens. But the problem is if you look to the right, you'll notice the villain's range has hit 55% of the time, which is another way of saying he missed 45% of the time. So if you do a bet post-flop that folds out high cards, it on average will work 45% of the time. If you bet 75% of the pot, which needs to work 42.8% of the time, that is very likely to happen. If someone has 10-9, for example, on a 6-7-3 board, they'll call half pot out of position, but 75% of the pot will freak them out. They're more likely to fold. Also, if this guy folds 2-2 or 4-4 to a 75% pot size bet on a 6-7-3 board, then he's folding even more than 45% of the time. Look at this range too. It's going to be easy to see what flops most people will be hitting when we 3-bet. The suited connectors, even if we add them, would only be 4 combos. However, there are 16 combos of queen jack in his range, 16 combos of jack 10, 16 combos of queen 10. That's why when you're looking, people always ask me, what do I have to pay attention to when I play? The biggest thing is to see what people are opening. If you see a jack 10 open from any spot, that just means all of these are here, and that's just a lot of combos that are going to miss the flop. And you're going to know what flops your guy hit. In general, our opponent is going to miss the flop often enough to allow us to use some creative c-bets to seal the pot. But if the board has 2 cards 9 or higher, then our opponent likely smashed it. We can take our free cards. The only thing you're worried about is 4-betting, but fortunately that doesn't happen too much. If you look at any database now, and I'm lucky enough to look at a lot of my students' databases, you'll notice that on average, the average guy is 4-betting about 1 hand out of 10, which means 90% of the time they're just looking to get exploited there with this kind of range. If they fold to your 3-bet, then you win, clearly, because the money's just forfeited. If they flat you and go post-flop, then you will win on most boards. You'll know the exact boards he's missing, which is going to be the majority of them that don't have 2 cards 9 or higher. That's how you get databases like this. You'll notice that I'm making a profit. I'm just using my database, guys, because that's the most ethical thing to do, but pretty much any winning player is going to look like this. I just want to illustrate a few things. You'll notice that I'm making a profit if no one 4-bets me with practically any 2 cards. But even more interestingly, this is what I wanted to show. You'll notice with the garbage hands, the profit margin is pretty much the same. That's because you're generally making money when nobody hits anything and they fold on the flop. But what's really interesting a lot of the times is you'll see aces. If you see anybody, if you see them not making as much money, a lot of times it'll be aces. One of the aces. And the reason for that is, okay, you want the guy to fold when he has nothing on the flop. Well, what is most of his nothing hands? It's going to be ace high. What are you blocking when you have an ace in your hand? So it just kind of goes to show you what you're really doing is just trying to get people to put money in pre-flop with too many hands and then fold on the flop. Again, this is not because I'm doing anything special. Most winning players I analyze have similar databases. The only thing they're doing wrong is not 3-betting enough. If you're getting numbers like this when pretty much anybody's opening 20% of the hands or more, your 3-bet of 6% or 7% or 9% is not enough. It should be 12, 15, 18. This is just me targeting people who open 20% of the hands or more and making them fold high cards post-flop using the basic combinatorics I just showed you over 3 minutes. Guys, if... Now, when you put in 4-bets, these go down to about 1 big blind, all the trash hands, because losing 7 big blinds 10% of the time actually does hurt. But if I'm making half a big blind, 1 big blind with 8-5 suited when this person raises, and your habit is to fold just every single time somebody opens, you're making 0 big blinds from this hand, who is more likely to go to the cashier's cage? But of course the question comes up, how do you know if this guy is opening 20% of the hands? So we have to discuss how to target effectively. Look for any hand being opened at the edges or beyond the 20% range. So that would be weak suited gappers, weak suited connectors, Jack-10 offsuit, or unsuited aces. Any low jack or later opener is typically opening 20% of the hands or more, almost always. Anybody, North American youth just is anybody under the age of 40, because most 30-year-olds, I'm in my 30s as well, we grew up with poker on the internet, so we're more comfortable with opening a little bit more. And most people in the live poker room are just bored these days, so they open too much. The other thing I want to say is if you see a weak suited connector, that's not the greatest evidence the guy's opening more than 20% of the hands, because many excellent cash game pros will actually have a very good opening range that will be tailored to exploit you if you 3-bet them too much. That's very much the GTO play. You see many of the Euros using that very effectively. And just to throw in a couple combos, they'll throw in like 7-8 suited or something, but there's only 4 of those combos. What you're really looking for is suited gappers. Suited gappers usually indicates a guy that wants to gamble, and the mother load is unsuited aces. Because if you see ace-8 offsuit open from like the hijack, that just opens up so many combos. Because again, unsuited anything is 12 combos, and then you have to include the suited combos, so it's 16. So if you're including all the aces, that's 16 combos of ace-2, 16 combos of ace-3, 16 combos of ace-4. That's a lot of folding when the board doesn't come with an ace. By the way, going back to boards that we know our opponent's going to hit, our opponent is going to hit ace-high boards a little bit more, because obviously aces are a very popular hand to raise call with. But if the board comes ace-high, we can do a very small bet, say like 1/3 pot, because usually the person either has an ace or they don't, and if they don't, they're just going to fold. So the bet that only needs to work 25% of the time is really likely to be that effective. Fastballs and curveballs. When the curveball was introduced, there were efforts to ban it in Major League Baseball. Right now, everyone knows what to do if you raise. It's like a fastball. Everybody's seen it their whole life. They know to 3-bet it, call it, whatever. It's all profitable. but no one really knows what to do to a 3-bet, and I'm convinced every strategy other than a comprehensive 4-bet bluffing strategy is garbage versus the 3-bet. So, guys, where poker was when I started, you couldn't open anything worse than eights. You couldn't open anything worse than ace-jack. That was just common wisdom. Then everybody started seeing Gus Hansen and Phil Ivey and Negreanu and Phil Hellmuth just open all this gunk and win. And they said, okay, I want to do that. And everybody started opening. And that's about as far as most games go, because opening is fun. It doesn't cost much. It's not really embarrassing if you get caught. But if you 3-bet junk and you get caught, who are you going to hear about it? But I think if everybody's opening everything and they're going to miss most boards, the most logical thing is to be 3-betting them a lot. But we'll discuss why that doesn't get done anymore. But anyway, what can you do if somebody's 3-betting you a lot? Most of the time you should just do nothing, because most people are not 3-bet bluffing. But the best cash game players will open ace-deuce off to ace-5 offsuit and 4-bet bluff. That adds just enough combos to make 3-betting unworkable. Absolutely no one is doing this in tournament poker though right now, especially stateside. No one even understands nuclear strategies. Nuclear strategies is just the idea. If you ever study game theory in regards to nuclear warfare, yeah, it's really comforting bedtime reading. Is the idea with a nuclear strategy is to convince the other party you're ready to fire the nuke at any time, and that will ensure you never have to do it. If the other party doesn't believe you'll fire the nuke, then they can pressure you, and then you might actually have to take some course of action. 4-betting is a little like this. We don't ever really want to 4-bet because the average person is 3-betting us a lot with good hands, but we would like people to think we're going to do that, so we can act like a wild man when we sit down. We can talk a lot. We can have an aggressive posture. There's a lot of different possibilities. If we want to imply we could possibly 4-bet, or we could 4-bet a very small amount when it doesn't mean that much. So, continuing, the 5 pre-flop plays you need to succeed. Number 1, open more when it's unlikely anyone will 3-bet you. And number 2, 3-bet target players opening 20+% of hands. All right, let's continue. And again, we're doing this with a mind to get one person to put a ton of money in the middle with a bunch of weak hands so we can steal that money later. This one's going to be a little easier. Well, it's a spot you're in a lot. You open in a $50 tournament online, you get 3-bet by a random guy. Maybe I shouldn't say it's going to be easier. It's going to be briefer. More brief. What's your move here? You should generally fold here, guys. This one is a little more simple than the other ones. Doug Polk needs to flat here or 4-bet because he's playing high-stakes players who 3-bet 12 to 15% of the time. Negreanu live should flat here because he will see something live that will help him post-flop to take the pot away. So it's in his best interest to call. Jungle Man should flat here online because he will get a timing tell he can use. But this is like calling an audible at the line of scrimmage. It's extremely dangerous if you don't know how to do it right. The whole reason you should raise weak hands pre-flop is because you think people are not 3-betting you without the goods. So you're getting to the big blind, he's calling with too many hands, and you're picking up those pots. When someone 3-bets you and you flat them out of position, you're directly contradicting the thought you had literally 8 seconds ago. The truth is, too, you don't need to go out of your way to play here. You're trying to take advantage of big ranges and no-limit hold'em. Your whole game pre-flop is to get people to commit to putting chips in the middle of the pot, out of position, with a lot of hands they'll have to fold post-flop. If you open and get the big blind to call you, that's a lights-out proposal because you get a guy to commit 3 or more big blinds out of position with 35% of hands. If you 3-bet and get a clown who's opening 20% of the hands and flattening all of them out of position to commit, you're going to pick up a ton of money when he bricks most flops. When a guy 3-bets you on average 6.6% of hands and you're out of position, I don't know how the hell you're going to get gold from this mine. It's dried up. You're running into bedrock. I'll bet you if we popped open the hood too, we'd see that most of these 3-bets were all ends. Even if this guy is bluffing a high percentage of the time, it's hard to give a 6% range that many bluffs. In this example, our opponent is only missing the board 38% of the time. That means we can't use the 2/3 pot size donk bet and 3/4 pot size donk bets post flop because those need to work 40% and 42.8% of the time. That means we have to use the half pot size donk bet, which almost surely is going to get floated. We just don't know what percentage of the time he's going to do that, so we can't turn a profit there. If we check raise, we have a huge problem too because a half pot size check raise is incredibly small and is likely to get floated in 3-bet often. If we check raise big, say the size of the pot, it needs to work 50% of the time. So if he just holds on with that pair of tens on average, we're screwed. Now, if we remove the bluffs, because many guys do not bluff on a 3-bet nearly as much as they should, and because most of that 6.6 3-bet is all ins, you will see that the guy is only missing the board 35% of the time. We can't do anything with that. Calling 3-bets out of position is a sucker bet. Most people fold when they miss the flop when they've called out of position. They flat when they flop a pair. They raise when they hit 2-pair or better. This is horrible. Imagine if I told you this. Okay, guys, I'm going to be really condescending, but it's going to help you remember it. Imagine I told you this. Hey, I want you to open with any halfway playable POS. I will then 3-bet you. You have to 4-bet all your big hands so I can get away for the minimum. But I want you to call with everything else so I get a free flop. Just all the crap you opened. Then on the flop, you have to fold if you miss, raise if you hit, so again, I can lose the minimum, and I want you to call when you have a pair so I can have 2 free cards to catch up to you. Sound good? Obviously, guys, let's stay away from this. Averages are important, and going back to this, guys, if you have a plan to check raise because the guy's 3-betting like 15% of the hands, if you have some kind of tell on him, obviously this doesn't apply. You can flat and work a strategy. If somebody 3-bets you a minuscule amount, yes, it's usually better to call. But if a guy 3-bets you something sizable and you don't really have a great plan, fit or fold, if you're playing fit or fold, you're consenting to this bet, which would be a sucker bet in the schoolyard. And I think we're all smarter than that. Averages are important. No one flats 3-bets profitably out of position, or most of my students don't. I don't. I've gotten it down to a certain point, but it's not that great. But if you don't believe me, go check out your distribution. I've looked at thousands of them. About 5% of people are profitable, and I'm convinced a lot of those accounts are running well. Averages are also important because many people say to me, but when I fold, I lose 2.5 big blinds, or the size of the raise, and if I call, I lose 1 big blind on average. Success. First of all, a loss is an effing loss. You haven't won anything. Second of all, averages matter. If you repeatedly put yourself in that spot to get 3-bet, and this is something my countrymen do a lot, Americans do, you're going to lose. Because obviously you're losing every one of these hands. Just because you mitigated the size of the loss doesn't mean they're going to be handing you a trophy. Dead grandma. If I told you that I was going to put your grandmother in a room that was kept at an average of 80 degrees, would you agree to it? If you did, I could then put the temperature at 0 degrees for the first 30 minutes and then 160 degrees for the last 30 minutes. This is not optimal for grandmas. This was Nassim Nicholas Taleb used this illustration to show you why an average can be so misleading. So do check out his book. This is my favorite book ever written. Averages are important. If you fold here, you know the loss. It's 250 chips. Your heart will go on. If you call, you're entering a different distribution. Your win column is going to be smaller on average, and your loss column can extend to 20 to 30 big blinds. That's a really big deal when you have 50 big blinds. You are penalized for death and lack of stack retention in tournaments. Every time you fold, your chips gain in value. Even though they have the same tournament chip value, they will increase in ICM chip value, assuming someone busts on that hand, because there's less people competing for the same prize pool. Therefore, it's more likely you'll cash. Every time you lose a tool, though, a little bit of post-flop maneuverability due to a short stack, your ROI goes down. Accepting a loss you know the exact distribution for is important. I think as we study poker tournaments a little bit more in the next 10 to 20 years, I think this is where there's going to be a lot of advances. All right, guys, this video has been brought to you by Master the Flop. Guys, this is the video series I did that started it all. I'm still blown away by the results my students got after they watched this video pack. Without getting into too many details about my life when this video series was made, the long and the short of it is this. In the midst of a health scare, I was trying to recount like every post-flop trick I used to get folds and insane value out of marginal hands while always keeping the ball in my court. And these files were the result. I never thought they would be as popular as they were with my students and with people who bought these videos. In this series, you're going to learn how to play the most common trouble boards, get more value, check back correctly, and always stay in control. I show all my work. It's all combinatorics. You can see all the ranges. And just ask yourself, is that how people play? And if the answer is yes, the overwhelming majority of the time, that is how they play, then this will show you the exploitable plays that will help you get folds when you need them. I have a system that I teach that's very much about chopping out pots pre-flop and chopping out pots on the flop. And to go beyond that, you need Master the Flop. You've heard me discuss that in other videos here, which was, keep the betting lead, those kind of concepts, PBSH, position bigger pots, superior hands, heads up. This is expanding past all of this. This is, how should you be thinking during the hands? When should you check back a flop? When should you buy the showdown? How do you bluff people on high card boards? How do you bluff people on suited boards, wheeled boards, paired boards, when straight draws come out, flush draw boards, when all the board is small cards, and more.
And that wraps up this part of the training series. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned a lot from it. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up to let me know how I'm doing. And if you learned something from this video, please let me know in the comments what your key takeaway or your biggest aha moment from watching this video was. I promise you, if you do that and then look at the other comments that are there, you're going to learn a whole lot more. This is the beauty of YouTube. This is the beauty of community. This is how we grow as a team, by sharing our insights, reading what others' insights were, and engaging in discussion to further develop those thought processes. I really hope you're enjoying this learning series. And when you're ready to watch more training lessons like this one, feel free to check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Gripst, or come by my website, www.gripst.com, and join Team Gripst for exclusive discounts, offers, and training opportunities. We got a whole lot of good ones coming on the way, and I hope that you are someone I will be getting to share them with. Let's get stacking. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it educational and entertaining. If you want to join Team Gripst, click on that subscribe button and tap that bell to be notified every time a new video goes live. For behind the scenes updates and motivational quotes from my poker journey, follow me on Instagram. And when you're ready to take one step closer to becoming poker's next champion, click on me in 3, 2, 1, and let's get stacking.